Hello everyone. We still had the original battery in our 2014 Outback, and I noticed it seemed to be getting a little flat last winter. The cold engine didn't sound like it was cranking over as fast as it used to. I had cleaned it and added distilled water to some of the cells over this past summer, but it was doing okay and it's never let us down, so I left it at that. But as soon as the cold weather came this year, it seemed to be worse, so I wanted to check it out before possibly replacing it. I took an in-depth course on lead-acid batteries in the early 2000s, but my career path swerved away from needing to apply that knowledge 20 years ago, so it's gotten very stale. I had some refreshing to do, and maybe some of the information I picked up with this experience will help you out as well. I'll start with cleaning the battery terminals. But first, I'll say a few words on battery safety. Lead-acid batteries store dangerous chemicals that are hazardous to your health. The most critical among them is sulfuric acid. If you aren't familiar with the hazards, I've included links to some important information in the description. Please take the time to view them before working with a car battery. Here's a quick rundown. Hit pause if you're not a speed reader. A byproduct of charging a lead-acid battery is the off-gassing of hydrogen. All it took was one spark to set off this famous hydrogen explosion. The same thing can happen when you're charging a battery. I've seen it happen. This is why you connect jumper cables to the car with the dead battery first, then disconnect them last. You don't want to create a spark close to a charging battery. You can use baking soda and water to clean up battery spills. Baking soda neutralizes the acid, but don't spill sulfuric acid in the first place. People have been severely injured when this happens. In this video, I'm trying out a cheap Centec battery load tester for the first time. I'll also be using an OTC brand hydrometer, and I'll show you how to use it. So let's get started. As typical, when the weather started to get cold again, the starter motor started to act sluggish. It wouldn't turn the engine over as fast as it usually does. Now I added some distilled water to this battery over the summer, so it should still be good. Well, it's time to clean up these terminals, obviously. Heavily corroded. Time to clean those up, and then I'm going to try a battery load tester that I got from Harbor Freight, which I've never tried. So these nuts here are on this car. It's a Subaru 10mm, is working fine. Remove the negative first, always. So I'm going to try spreading this clamp out a little bit with a screwdriver. There's a slot in there, but it looks like it's not really going to fit in that slot. And one thing for sure is you never want to pound on these battery posts too hard. Or at all if you can help it, but there. Can you see that slot opened up there? So I'm going to start by cleaning these posts off a bit, but to begin with I'm going to vacuum this crud off. And so you can just use a regular handheld wire brush to start things off with. Okay, now I like to follow it up with one of these battery post cleaners. It's got like a cylindrical shaped brush on the inside there. It just fits down over the posts, twist it around, and it does a nice job of cleaning it. See that? Getting there. That one wasn't so pretty, really. Alright, that's better. You can get these battery terminal cleaners with stamped metal construction with a round wire brush hidden under the cover. Inside. And then they also have them like this, made out of plastic. Now that's nice and clean on the inside. This one needs more work. Now they sell these things in the plumbing section. It's a 3/4 inch ID. It's for cleaning out copper fittings when you're going to solder them. They're a larger diameter than these brushes are. And they get down in there and do a pretty good job, as you can see. That's pretty darn good. I've been wanting to give this load tester a try. Before doing any of these battery tests, be sure the battery is fully charged and acclimated to the ambient room temperature. Okay, so my Fluke DMM says 12.51 volts DC. The battery load tester says 12.8. So it's off a little, it's not too far off. The battery is rated at 490 cold cranking amps. And that's reading again 12.8 volts. And on the DMM, 12.51. Hopefully you can see it there. Testing the battery. With the clamps connected, the tester's gauge will show the battery's current charge. I think they mean state of charge. If it's less than 12 volts, disconnect the battery and recharge before testing. Press and hold the toggle switch for at least 5 seconds to simulate an actual load on the battery. View the meter display and read the battery condition. Release the toggle switch and remove the cable clamps from the battery. Okay, 5 seconds. Okay, that went down to the 400 mark. And look at that, the battery is at 12.1817 and it's gradually, slowly coming back up. 12.22. We started out at 12.51. This says load test 15 seconds. I only did 5. This is a good time to address a mistake I made, which I'll show you, because this load tester manual is pretty misleading. On page 4 under testing the battery, it says to do a 5-second load test. Then on page 5, the display reading table appears to indicate the readings are for a 15-second load test, which I proceeded to do. I shouldn't have done that, because on page 3, the product specifications list a test cycle of 10 seconds per test with 1 minute cooldown and a maximum of 3 tests per 5 minutes. I really didn't see much difference in my readings from 5 seconds to 10 seconds or from 10 seconds to 15 seconds. So in the future, I'll be doing only a 5 to 10 second test because 15 seconds is outside the operating specifications of this tester. So I won't do that again. I didn't check the specific gravity on the battery. It was definitely down in the weak yellow area. Well, we're up to 12.36 volts now. It's still rising. I'll let it recover and then I'll do a 15-second test. 12.38. This says 12.6. While I was waiting, I checked the battery electrolyte levels. You'll see that happening in a few minutes. All right, let's get back to our testing here. Hook up the positive first. Then the negative. Hook up the meter. Came up to 12.5 volts. And this thing says 12.8. Or this is going to be a 15-second load test, so here we go. Alright, so battery capacity and cold cranking amps, it went down to the line between the yellow weak indicator and the green 400 indicator. So it was delivering 400 cold cranking amps for most of that time. And unfortunately, now it's down at 12.28 volts. But battery voltage dropped to 10.42 volts during the load test. And now we'll see how long it takes to recover. This thing's hot. It's just a heater in there. So let me remove this. So I can move it somewhere and let it cool off in a safe place. These battery caps just pry off. They're plastic and they're actually a little fragile, so you need to be gentle. But they just pry up like that. That's how they come off. So we get distilled water in a gallon jug and I pour some into this salsa container that's been thoroughly cleaned. That way I don't waste any. You don't want to pour it back in there after it's been mixed with acid. Then I just use this thing like an eyedropper and dose out enough distilled water into the battery to bring it up to level. Just one more little drop. It's difficult to see the electrolyte fill level with your goggled eyes, and even more difficult to see it with a cell phone camera. So I sketched up some diagrams to try to make it more clear. But if you look closely, you'll see the top of the lead plates submerged in clean electrolyte in this brand new battery. Unfortunately, as we're looking down the vent columns, we can't see them very well in the video. You can see them a little better with your eyes and a flashlight, but it's still tricky to see where the fill level actually is. So let's go to the diagrams. This is a simple drawing of the cross-section of a car battery. Notice the vent opening on top. That's where you add water and take hydrometer readings. You can see the liquid fill line above the lead plates and below the bottom of the vent column. In a car battery, the liquid level must always be above the plates and very close to the bottom of the vent tubes. Some industrial and solar batteries require the liquid level to be farther below the bottom of the tube. Check with the manufacturer for their fill specs. Now, here we can see the liquid line is right at the bottom of the vent column. That's where we want it for our car batteries. This different cross-section shows us how there's a slot in the car battery vent column. The purpose of the slot is to allow vent gases to escape through the vented cap when the liquid level is blocking off the bottom of the vent tube. Okay, now I'll be using an OTC brand hydrometer to check the specific gravity of the battery electrolyte. Specific gravity indicates the ratio of the density of sulfuric acid in the battery versus the density of distilled water. These are all the parts of the hydrometer. Here's the squeeze bulb, the main glass tube, the float with the graduations on it, and the dip tube that goes into the battery to draw electrolyte out of it, which includes this thermometer. Now, to assemble this, it's important to note that the glass tube has a plug at the top. There's 3 little holes in it to allow air to vent through there. The top of the float goes up inside toward that plug, and then this is the bottom down here. Then the squeeze bulb just goes on the top, like so. And that's it. So it's good to know how it's assembled, and it's especially good to know that that plug is in the top, because as the float rises up, it will hit that stopper in the top. And the water can keep rising. If you draw enough electrolyte in, it'll keep rising. And that's what you'll see happen to me. It rose to the top. Now I'm holding it upside down just for illustration. The water rose, kept rising, and it was up in the red zone. But that's only because the float couldn't keep going. So I drew too much water in that time. You need to draw just enough electrolyte to get the top of that thing to rise up maybe an inch or ½ inch from the top. And then you can take the reading, because the float will be floating. It's good to rattle it too to make sure it's free. This float inside the glass tube of the hydrometer is actually the hydrometer itself. It could be floated in a glass jar full of electrolyte and work just as well, but it's provided with this glass tube to more safely contain the electrolyte, so I don't recommend using it any other way. The top of the hydrometer contains measurement ranges that give a quick reference to the condition of the electrolyte. If the hydrometer doesn't float higher than the red zone, you'll know you have a problem battery. Really, anything other than the good zone indicates a potentially weak battery. Looking at the other side of the float electrolyte scale, there are labeled measurement increments. The float level the electrolyte rises to indicates the specific gravity of the battery acid. For example, the electrolyte simulated here is at the 1.250 specific gravity level. However, it's the common practice in battery world to simply omit the decimal point and pronounce it as 1250. Rolling the hydrometer a little farther reveals a set of finer measurement increments. There are 5 minor increments between each major increment. Each of the minor increments is equal to 5 points. Reading this simulated electrolyte level, we see it's 1 increment away from 1225. Its value is 1230. Do you see it? So I pulled the caps off this battery. I'm just going to check the specific gravity with a hydrometer. A hydrometer is a tool that's used to check specific gravity of the electrolyte in the battery. So you squeeze the bulb, squeeze all the air out, immerse the end of the dip tube here in the battery, and pull out a nice load of electrolyte. You can see how I flooded the whole tube, forcing the float to hit the top stopper, making it impossible to get an accurate read. You look for where that marker is floating. The water line is the line that tells you where you are. And this thing is in right on the bottom of that white section. There's a delicate balancing act here. You want enough liquid to float the gauge freely, but not so much it hits the plug at the bottom of the squeeze bulb. This is right on 1.25. 1.25. It's in the white, which is not necessarily good. That one's in the green. That one's right on the borderline between green and white. Yeah. White says fair. This one is in the white again, 1.25. Right on the line between green for good and white for fair. Well, it's fair. It's on the upper end of fair, meaning the good end of fair. All 6 cells are fair. But every cell on this battery hovered right in the white area, the fair condition area, at around 1.25 specific gravity. So specific gravity on this is marginal. And I still have to apply temperature compensation. Now, before we go to a state of charge table such as this, we need to consider temperature compensation. The industry standard temperature for reading battery electrolyte is 80 degrees Fahrenheit. So this table isn't really accurate at any other temperature. As the temperature changes, the density of water changes, and the density of sulfuric acid changes. So your specific gravity readings will change. Conveniently, this OTC hydrometer has this thermometer built right into it. But this thermometer doesn't read degrees of temperature. Instead, it indicates the number of specific gravity points to add or subtract from your unadjusted readings. If the thermometer indicates the temperature is greater than 80 degrees Fahrenheit, add the point value indicated to your specific gravity reading. If the thermometer indicates the temperature is less than 80 degrees Fahrenheit, subtract the point value indicated from your specific gravity reading. Here's an example. The mercury in the thermometer indicates 12 points, and it's below 80 degrees. Since it's below the 80 degree line, you want to subtract the number of points indicated by the mercury from your specific gravity reading. If we subtract 12 points from a reading of 1250, we end up with 1238. Now we can look at our state of charge table to determine the condition of the battery. The battery state of charge table indicates that at our specific gravity of 1238, the battery is only half charged. You could try charging the battery, then letting it return to room temperature, then take another round of hydrometer readings. If there's no improvement, it may be time for a new battery. We don't know what this winter has in store for us, but a lot of people have already died being stuck out on the interstate not far from here. Based on the facts that this battery is 8 years old, has low cranking power, has poor specific gravity, and I'm not willing to take the risk that my family might be stranded somewhere, I'm replacing this battery. By the way, I should have done the specific gravity test before any load testing. Load testing can reduce the battery's specific gravity. After load testing, I actually recharged the battery overnight before using the car. My next video will follow up on this one. I'll repeat the battery test on a brand new battery for comparison. I'll take a deeper dive into the density and specific gravity numbers and show how they blend to make electrolyte at the temperature corrected specific gravity. I'll also have some battery factoids and battery storage information for anyone parking their power equipment or vehicles for the winter. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.